Hello Internet! Today we are going to be taking another look at our asset importer. So what this has been doing is importing SVG assets and then converting them to PNGs so we can actually use them inside of Unity. Typically you can't use SVGs inside of Unity itself because they're vector graphics. They're using math instead of like textures or something like that. So if we just click on an SVG, this is all we get, which isn't very useful. But we can convert those into something that we can use as a texture, which is great for using like UI or some other tool that we might be creating. That's typically how I've been using this. So that's sort of what we're building. How this works right now is we have this fun little tools menu that we added. So I can click generate SVGs and it's going to go and launch a series of Inkscape processes to go and render each of the SVGs in my project into a new PNG. In this case, they already exist, so it's just replacing the file with the same file. So nothing interesting happened, but that's how it works. You can see we have like a little progress show on the bottom here with the background tasks. We also are popping up my terminal because how this is working is we're actually calling out to a background process to run it. We can disable that window popping up. I just haven't gotten that far yet, so that's what it looks like. But here's what we have. What we're going to be doing today is trying to make this a little nicer. We're going to be plugging into Unity's asset pipeline. And so instead of having to manually click a menu item, I want it so that whenever I drag and drop an SVG into Unity, it automatically processes it. So if I take this, this is just a random SVG from the Fluent UI pack, and just drop it into Unity. It automatically starts the process to process it and convert it into something that I can actually use, using whatever defaults make sense. That doesn't happen right now, so we have to manually go and trigger this, but that's sort of what I'd like to do. Another advantage of doing this is that we don't have to regenerate everything every time I import or change one thing. So if I update one of these SVGs, maybe change like the font or something like that, I have to go and regenerate everything. All of it needs to change. That's not great for if we have like thousands of assets for this. So instead, hopefully, we can just have it trigger like a normal asset and it just operates like that. You can see I've already done a little bit of work here. So we can actually see we got a new console thing to pop up that says we re-imported an asset. We imported an asset from somewhere, and it has the path to what we just brought in. This is using sort of the template from Unity's documentation, this template, for how to actually go and create an asset pipeline. So I've pulled this in just so it's already there, so we don't have to go and rewrite that. There's a bunch of stuff that this can do. We're going to do part of it. We're not going to cover all of it right now, just because that's a lot. So that's the idea. We're gonna basically plug into this. So whenever this re-import asset gets called, which is basically whenever a new asset gets imported into the project, we want to trigger our job. So it's only doing what it's currently like what would currently affect everything, only for that one asset. So here's how this works. Let's just quickly walk through how asset postprocessors work. They're very similar to how you might use like a mono behavior in Unity, where you extend a class, in this case, the asset postprocessor, and then that calls specific methods. Unity has a bunch of these defined, usually predefined for different common types that you would use. If you're not using a common type, you sort of have to build your own, which is what we're doing. And so the common types would be things like textures, it'd be a mesh, normal things that you would use inside of Unity that it already supports. Those are the pipelines that it's already processing through. You can plug into those and add your own custom bits if you would like to. This OnPostprocessAllAssets is just going to be a catch-all for everything that gets imported, everything that gets deleted, how the changes are happening in your project. This gives you a way to track that. Plus, you can then plug into it and add fun things. So there's really three types of operations you can do as far as files are concerned. You can create a file, you can delete a file, or you can move a file. And so we have those three tracked here. The first one is for creating files. So imported assets would be anything that is new. So something that we just created inside of Unity, or potentially, I think if you modify it outside of Unity and then bring it in, that would be an imported asset. Deleted assets are different. They're the things that you've deleted. So things that are no longer there. And then moved assets, there's actually two arguments for this. There's the moved asset, which is where the thing is now. And then there's the moved from asset path, which is where it was originally. So we could use that if we were clicking and dragging our SVGs and moving those files to also update the PNG that goes along with it and maybe bring that along. We're not going to do that right now, but that's a potential for a future thing. And then did domain reload? I honestly don't know what that does yet, so we're not going to talk about it. But there is documentation for this entire thing. So if you're curious about that, you can go and find that. But really what we're going to do is focus on this imported assets. That'll get us started and let us kind of start doing things. And then we can finish up the rest later. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is actually pull out this imported assets into its own thing. So we'll just call this assets ? And I'm going to create a where clause that just says where the asset has in a specific extension. So in this case, everything that we're working with is strings representing the relative path inside of Unity that we're going to be working with. I'm going to filter those so we only detect SVG files. We're going to be generating like PNGs, for example. We don't want to recursively regenerate files every time we create one, because that's too much. Also, if I drag in like a README or some other type of file, we can't convert that into an image. I don't know what that means. So we only want to filter on SVGs. That's all this is going to do. So get the extension for the asset and check that it is equal to .svg. And that should get us a result. I'm going to quickly render this list. We're using link here. Link is a lazily evaluated thing. What that means is that it's not evaluated until you actually ask it to be. So if we just left the where clause here without that to list, anytime that I asked for this assets anywhere in this file, what would end up happening is it would actually get evaluated again. So we'd go through that entire imported assets list. We'd do the comparisons for strings, etc. That's probably not a big deal for small data sets, things like small 1-2 files that we're dragging in. But if we're dragging in like an entire asset pack of thousands potentially of SVGs, we don't want to do all of that, especially if there's like thousands of other like metadata files and things like that. We don't want to reprocess that and check that more than we have to. So this evaluation is going to prevent that from happening. And that's it. So we'll just swap this out with our new version, our new assets. And now this should only work for SVGs. So just to make sure I didn't break anything, we're going to do all of this and delete our thing. There we go. So our icon goes away. And then we should be able to just grab a few of these and drag and drop them in. And we still see re-imported asset notifications. So we know it's still detecting them. So from there, we should be able to actually take our generator script, the script that we're using for generating this stuff, and just apply it to those limited files that we have. So let's do that. Let's go and grab this SVG generator. We built this in a previous thing, so I'm not going to cover what this is or how this works. We're just going to go and grab it and then go and put it inside of here. For now, I'm not going to move this out into a separate file. We now have this duplicated in 2 different classes, so it's probably a good option for refactoring and making it nicer than, well, this. But we can currently kind of leave that alone. And so we can make that nicer separately. It's kind of outside of the scope of what we're doing right now. And then what we want to do is update this a little bit more. Because what this is currently doing is actually going and searching for every file in my assets and updating them. We don't want to do that because we already have all of them. We already have all the files. So instead, we just want to go and collect the ones that we're using. So in this case, we have our SVG files. We don't need to enumerate all the files. We don't need to, we might want to count them. Files to count, sure. But really, we can just take this for each up here and plug it in right there. And that should cover everything. There's going to be a bunch of other stuff that I've screwed up, but that should be okay. Let's pull in the tasks. Fix that. Delete that extra little bit. And then we have all these SVG file things, which we deleted as part of our little modification here. So we'll just call this our SVG file. That should fix all of that. Import our process. So we're using the system diagnostics process as a way to invoke out to a new process. Currently, the way this works is we expect Inkscape, which is the program that I'm using for this conversion, to be on your path. Your path is where your computer searches for binary files when you try to execute something on your terminal or from your shell. Theoretically, I think Inkscape has like a portable version we could actually include in our project. We're just not. So there's that. This should be Unity engine.debug. I think we just have some conflicts here with what's going on. Because we're using debug and this is coming from a debug thing, it looks like we're getting some conflicting imports. So let's just explicitly give these a path. Yeah, there we go. So all the debug.log just need a Unity engine in front of them. That's only happening because I have multiple things that have debug exposed in my imports. And then path.combine. This, we don't need to search anything. We've already done the search. We don't need to do enumerate files or do anything like that. We can keep the processed files count. So we count the number of files that we actually process as part of this. We can keep that around. That's actually kind of a useful thing to do. But we don't need any of the other stuff that's tied to search. Everything up here is just handling cancellation and then the ability to actually track progress. So if we import a big thing and then we start calling out to Inkscape and generating, again, like the 2000 plus like icon pack, that could take minutes/hours, and you may not want to wait that long. So there is the option to cancel. That's what this is handling. And then the rest of this should just work. The only thing that I don't know is if the file name is correct. We'll have to see. So what this is doing is actually changing the file extension for our file. I might, as part of this entire change, I might have changed this from a low or from a absolute path, which means from the drive letter all the way to the name of the file, to a relative path, which means it's based off of some pre-existing location. That might have changed. I don't think so, but we'll see. And so let's go and run this and see what happens. I think that should be everything that we needed to do. Apologies if that was a little chaotic. We're just updating things so that this actually works. Let's pull a file in. And so if this does work, we should see we get generating SVGs, we get everything to pop up. And now we have our little snoozing bell. And so I can actually do this lots of times. we can just take this entire thing and just drag and drop them all in. And we should hopefully train. We should hopefully see a whole bunch of things get generated for us. And so now we have a whole bunch of different images that we can actually use in our game as a way to update things. And this should work for other things too. So if I go up a little bit into here, we should be able to just grab like a bunch of these. This is probably not a great idea, but let's grab some airplane stuff and just import that. So we can pull this in. I imported different folders. So we're getting all this generated inside the airplane folder now because we're generating airplane icons. But it should all be generated just the same. So this gives us sort of a nice way to do that. And if we ever want to say stop, we can just hit cancel, and it should eventually cancel. I might have to do a little bit of work there, but there's everything. You can see none of these have their have a PNG associated with them. So nothing got generated there. But if I jump over here, a bunch of these do. So we did actually generate the correct behavior for some of this. So yeah, I think that's it. But that's how you do like custom asset things. We can make this way more complicated. This was just intended as like a really quick, how does this work? Also, I use SVGs all the time for like my menus and custom UI stuff. So this seemed like a handy thing to have. It is definitely not something that you can just plug in right now, but I will try to make the code cleaner and post like a something that you can actually use with like a GitHub link in the description. So you can actually grab this and pull it into your projects if this is something that would be useful. There's probably other modifications that would be useful, like being able to change the resolution so that it's not always a 64 by 64 image. That isn't always super useful. Also, potentially hooking even further into the asset pipeline and making it so that these images that it's generating are actually generating correctly with like transparency, because that's something that you have to actually manually enable in Unity right now. These images do have transparency. We just need to go and click alpha is transparency, apply that, and the image becomes transparent. But that's a manual process. So if we want to make that something that just happens automatically, we would have to plug in a little bit more. But for now, I think that's sort of everything that I wanted to cover. Hopefully this is useful. If you do start like building your own custom asset pipelines or something, let me know, because that would be super cool and I'd love to hear about it. Otherwise, I just hope this is interesting and you can use it in your projects. So I guess until next time, see you, Internet.